Hello everyone, Nathaniel Gavronsky here, and I want to bring up something that was in the news this past week. A couple of weeks ago, I did a video about the work I was doing in Congress about people with disabilities, especially those born with a disability. They weren't able to make ends meet because Social Security treats them so horribly as far as what their allowances are. Don't forget, these are people that are disabled from birth. They never had a chance to work. Many of them have tried to work, and it hasn't worked out for them. Many of them try job after job after job to no avail. A lot of them live on an amount of money that's less than $800 a month. And there really isn't anywhere for them to live at that, for that amount of money. A lot of them end up living in abandoned trailer parks, which there are quite a few, surprisingly. Some of them try to homestead in abandoned buildings. This is a thing. A lot of people who were homeless out in California and in Florida and the South, a lot of them were living on SSI. This is what they're called. The most you can get is 841. Most of them get way less than that. Many of them, if they're lucky enough to have a parent alive, they will live with their parent until that parent dies. And then the apartment they had lived in, that they had, only place they ever known as home, they lose because they can't cover the rent or the mortgage or the property taxes, even if the house is left to them. These people have very, very few resources, and it's not that they're lazy. See, a lot of people think, well, welfare, if they just weren't so lazy, it wouldn't be a problem. Well, these people aren't lazy. They do try to work. It's just that the fact that their disability doesn't allow them to hold gainful employment. And again, I was ridiculed like, no, they're just lazy. All they gotta do is get a job. It's so easy to get a job. Okay. But let's look at it this way. In Stanley, South Carolina, this past week, a person is 51 years of age. His name is Dennis Peak. He has Down syndrome. So it's 21 syndrome. It's where the 21st chromosome actually has a mutation, and it can a lot of times limit someone's cognitive ability. Now, not all of them are the same. Some of them cognitive ability can be around the age of 4, some 12. Some of them can hold gainful employed jobs for a very long time, but those are the extremely lucky few. Mr. Peak worked at this Wendy's in Stanley, North Carolina. I believe it was North or South Carolina. I believe it was in North Carolina, Stanley, North Carolina. Okay, he'd worked there for over 2 decades. And a lot of these restaurants, a lot of these places have transient workers, which means they come in as a high school student, they work for a while, then they move on. Some of them are, trying to get a part-time job to cover some other bills for a little short period of time and they move on. There's a lot of people who come in and out of fast food jobs, and I'd call them transient workers because not very many of them pick a career out of it. Dennis, though, was the exception. He'd been there for over 20 years. Most managers have not been at their fast food restaurant for that long. Okay, this guy was dedicated. Now, if anyone's ever dealt with people with Down syndrome, they're very emotional. They're sometimes even overly emotional. They're kind of the flip opposite of autism, where the person with autism will actually have a recessed emotion kind of set of emotions that they latch onto. They're very reserved and not always so well versed, and they're not always so bubbly. But Down syndrome is the very opposite. These people are very, very emotional. They're very, very happy most of the time. They are the happiest people usually in any room. I've dealt with a lot of people with Down syndrome, and they are a lot of fun because they're almost always very happy. I wish I could feel that way as much as they do. This man had dreamed of retiring from this Wendy's at one point in time because that was his job. That was his career, was working at that Wendy's. And they fired him. Why did they fire him? Because he couldn't do the job as a normal person, according to the management. Now, I think there's more to this story than just what's being reported. His sister, who actually went in and got a termination letter, I believe they were going to review as far as a wrongful termination, and they still might do so. This made headlines and became quite viral, and people all over the country started saying, hey, this might not have been correct. Well, the owner of that specific Wendy's, there's a chain of them, their franchise owner has a chain of them, got involved and said, no, we'll hire the person back. But there's also more to the story. See, this person, the families decided not to let Dennis to go back to work, and they're going to give him that retirement party he had always hoped for. The restaurant chain, for its credit, is actually going to cover most of the expenses for this and cover some of the other expenses of his well-being. Now, Dennis could have been on disability. In fact, he has probably worked long enough to get on SSDI, which is, on $1,400, which is not as much as his paycheck would have been if he would have continued working at Wendy's each month. Because I mean, the Wendy's, you're getting paid around $200 to $2,500, depending on what position you have and what wages and what city and location you're in. The fact is that everyone's kind of going against the manager. It's not necessarily the manager's fault. See, the manager has to deal with not only this employee, but with 20 other employees. Now, I've worked in places where people constantly complained that I wasn't fast enough, that I wasn't able to work fast enough, or that, my tone of voice, which sometimes can be very, people have different names for it. I can't hear it the way people do, so I really don't understand it. But it becomes a problem. I actually got let go from a job because on the phone, I sounded too much like a robot. And that was the reason they terminated. But that's part of my Asperger's, was the sounding like a robot when I read things verbatim off of a screen onto a phone. Sometimes some of these videos come out that way, from what I've been told, and it's okay. It's part of who I am. However, this person, because of who he is, none of his control, a lot of people who have to work with him don't want to. This is what people don't understand. It's not just the job itself. It's the other people that you have to work with every day. A lot of people also have other things going on in their lives, and when they're at work, they want the least amount of stress as possible. For this man here, he might have been that straw that broke the camel's back on a lot of his coworkers just not wanting to work with him. Now, I've seen this happen at a lot of workplaces, not only against me, but there were other places where there was a person with Down syndrome or some other type of cognitive inability or even physical inability that the other coworkers just refused to work with. I remember I was working a job in Iowa, and there was a couple of handicapped people who were coming in, and the manager of this place would purposely only allow them to work in the back of the store. They had zero interaction with any other coworkers, any of the people who they're supposed to be working as equals to. In fact, they had no interaction with any of the customer base. Now, I don't think this was a good idea, because the whole point of them going out and doing these experiments and these job placements was for them to get to learn how to behave and manage themselves in a workplace. But if you're shoved in the back room of a retail store where no one will ever see you, and all you do is unpack and pack boxes and move things off of a truck, you're not learning anything. I mean, that's not going to teach you how to better interact with other human beings. But see, that manager had to worry about the other coworkers who had apparently voiced some complaints with that deal with some of these people because of their smell, because of their lack of understanding their communication patterns, their obnoxious laughs, a variety of reasons, actually. And so the manager said, well, I know how to solve this. I'll just put them all in the back, not thinking of the harm that they were doing. They were just worried about the store as a whole, and I think in this situation, this situation is very similar. The manager was trying to balance not only this man, but also all the other coworkers and all the other employees that she was managing. And even though the other ones are transient, they are probably there more often. He's only one person, who's only able to work so many hours a day, where everyone else was moving around shifts and were working probably more hours than he was. And so I understand why the manager decided that he was the one to let go. Doesn't make it right, but I understand where the manager was coming from. See, this is what people don't understand. It's not about not being able to do the job. A lot of people with disabilities can do a job. It's the fact that they're not able to do the job to the degree in which the private sector, the business owners and the businesses require them to. It's not necessarily that they can't do the job up to the level, it's that the coworkers just don't like them. Now, it's not a crime to not like someone, but it should be known that people get vibes from each other. It just happened. If you have never gotten a bad or a good vibe about someone, you're kidding yourself. All right, everyone does. I can feel good and bad vibes to a limited degree to people. Sometimes I can get misled by someone's malevolent behavior. But to be completely honest, there's not a single person out there that can't get some type of vibe from people. A feeling of not trusting, a feeling of like this person's weird. And humans don't interact very well with people that are drastically different from them, especially in the way they behave. behavior has the highest impact on to people getting along, more so than any other characteristic about the two individuals. And if someone's behavior is so different, so far, I don't know, different and, uncommon or uneasy towards everyone else, they're not going to like that individual. That's just the way humans work. And this person, this Mr. Dennis Peak, was a victim of that. Not only was he a victim of his condition, he was also a victim of other people's inability to work with him due to the fact that they were uncomfortable and it made it very hard for them to do their jobs. That's the reason why Social Security disability with SSI and SSD, I need to reevaluate how they look at these individuals. Also understanding that these people may not be homebound, but they're not dead. They have aspirations. They want to work. They would like to try to work. Many of them try and fail getting a job every single day. And every time many of them attempt, they're even punished for doing so. This needs to be reevaluated, and we need to reevaluate how we address these people, how they are handled in the workplace, how coworkers are able to deal with stresses with dealing with people who are not up to snuff as far as the job duties are concerned, and what we're going to do about these people as far as financial stability. It is likely that this person will never work again, only being 51, and the way disability retirement works, they review the last several years, more importantly, the last couple of months of someone's employment before they decide on how much money they will get for the retirement. For this individual, I'm hoping that his sister knows enough to apply for disability, SSDI, to qualify for as much amount of benefit as they possibly can before it's too late, because the longer he goes without working, the lower that benefit will be. And after he hits the age of 65, his fund might be a little bit different because he hadn't worked for so long. These are some areas that Social Security needs to work on, because it's not up to the way the world works today. The way this manager handled this situation was not the best, but it could have been way worse. If Mr. Peak would have returned back to the store, there's no telling with the other coworkers and how they would have treated him. We're missing a lot of information here. We don't have how he interacted with a lot of the other coworkers. The stories, and there's been more than one source, and that he had a great time working with his customers, but there's very little communication about the co-workers themselves and how they reacted to his termination. I think this is a telltale sign that the co-workers were a much larger component to his termination than his own behavior was. And this is something that people don't understand. So I would like people who want to make mockeries of people living on disability if they're lazy or that they just get a job. You don't know what you're talking about. You really don't. And for those of you out there, the political activists who also treat these people with utmost disdain because they're not as cool as you, they don't have as much money as you, they don't dress as nice, they might not have the proper etiquette as you, they might not fit in all the little checked boxes that you would like them to be, doesn't make them any less human, doesn't make them any less part of your movement, and doesn't make them any less of a supporter of your candidates. And if you are a candidate running for office and you see one of these people that desperately are trying to help you win, take notice of it. You have no idea how much more effort it takes for them to participate than everyone else. I know a person in Iowa who's participated in a lot of campaigns. He never gets a dollar, never gets paid, makes thousands of phone calls every year, and his family's going broke trying to help him stay involved, because this is literally what keeps him going. This is his only outlet. That's it, his only socialization. And most people within the area would much rather him, do all the work, but behind closed doors, where he can't be seen or heard. That's the reality of it. They might pretend to be nice to his face, but I hear these people speak more bad about him behind his back. I can only imagine what they say about me. And these people talk about how they want to give rights to each individual, and each individual has, is amazing, and that's what they're fighting for, is for the individual rights and freedoms. Okay. Practice what you preach. I really hope people will get some. Well, this will get to you in some way or shape or form. You understand what these people are dealing with. That young man in Iowa, I said, he's going broke trying to help you out, trying to participate. When his parents finally die off and the rest of his family are gone, he's not going to be able to make it. Not even close. In fact, his income is so low that there isn't a building or a place in the entire state where he could afford rent. Not a single one. And with little to no actual job experience as far as a W-2 or even 1099, he's got no money going into Social Security to the claim disability in his own right, or a retirement amount, which would be more than his current payout. He's got no savings. He's got no retirement funding. He will be 100% dependent on the charity of others. And that charity itself will not be enough. So let Dennis Peak be a lesson to everybody who says, well, these people are just lazy. They could go get a job if they wanted one. You don't know what you're talking about. Maybe you should listen to the people who are actually living this for reals and hear what they have to tell you about their attempts to have a gainful employed job. I'm Nathaniel Gavronsky. Thank you for listening. Please share this video, like it, and subscribe, and I will hope to continue to discuss a variety of topics, political and societal, on this channel. Thank you very much and have a good night.